We are recording.
Let's see. Well, welcome interwebs to a very special episode of Big Bottom, where this week Tony finds out he has sunglasses on his head.
What? All along.
I know. Who knew?
That's where they were.
Who knew? It was the mid-season twist nobody saw coming.
It was building up. It was like
right. But actually, you'll see what I did here. Speaking of things no one saw coming, we had a killer show with Lee Presgrave and Jim Bergantino talking about the thought process and everything behind the cabinets and specifically the B amp, which I personally, anytime somebody uses the phrase game changer in their marketing, I immediately write it off because I think it's overused and overplayed. However, by them saying that the B amp is a game changer, it's not a lie. It's completely legit.
I was impressed. I was totally impressed when he talked about what he uses for the DI and the Bluetooth functionality for the pedal, and like how you could potentially in the future assign page turners to the other buttons and so forth.
That got me excited.
It's crazy. Remember when I got this amp, I told you guys, I was like, you guys, this has a Bluetooth fucking foot pedal. Literally, there's no, it's Bluetooth. I can just be over here and I can go mute, blah, blah, whatever.
Well, and according to Lee, you can also turn on and off your ceiling fan.
Yes, you can. Boom. Let me see. No, but in the, I mean, and then you saw, the raddest thing is Jim Bergantino is like mad scientist, but he's a mad scientist that really listens to players and people, which is sometimes you get that engineer mind that has that hubris, that engineer hubris that is so like this, that they miss the other stuff. And Jim,
thank God for Lee. Lee balances them out.
Yeah. And I mean, Bergantino's been around forever. I mean, that guy, everything he's done is great. It's been good ever since the inception. And he even admits, he's like, I'm not a player, but I listen, he listens. So that's, I was blown away, man. He had some things that he was saying that literally, I don't know if it just, my mind was blown.
Yeah. This is definitely a deep dive type of of interview today.
It was nerding to, it was gnarly. It was awesome. Out of body. So we have some sponsors, don't we, kids?
Yes, we
have some sponsors.
Yes, we do. Steve, who's the first sponsor today?
Let's say a badass strap. We always talk about straps. Italia Leather. Italia Leather. Look at that.
These guys are great.
Yeah. They'll work with you. Michael at Italia has become a buddy. I called him today, but it's Italia.
And they even do custom work. Like I do fixed lengths.
Tony's.
Nice.
Tony. Yeah, his is fixed length, which they did. They had it out in 2 weeks.
Not even
that. For a
Not
custom.
even. So I'm on the East Coast or the West Coast. I had a week and a half later.
And they're in
half of that's probably shipping. So
I know, right?
Out.
So they cut it. They're in Northern California or California, somewhere around there. I don't know.
Central Coast, I believe. Yeah.
Central Coast.
It's kind of a wine and black.
What I like
chocolate.
I love the suede because it grips.
Oh, nice. Sure.
But they do a leather backing also if you like the more.
That's what I have. I have a leather back.
You like leather back? I like suede. Okay. Mine is adjustable. Tony's isn't. So it's like 4-inch, and I think they do a 2-inch. They do a not so wide.
I think it's 4 and 2.5.
Yeah. So italiastraps.com, they always have a 2-for-1 deal. So if you go on italiastraps.com and go to on sale now, there's always a buy one, get one free code. So you have to look for that. They are amazing. my new favorite strap. I have 2 of them. Gonna get more, but give italiastraps.com a shout.
Oh man, I've got 4 of these.
You have 4. I have 2. John's gonna get a couple.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, but they're a sponsor. They're one of our sponsors. All right,
One of our sponsors.
who's
Tony, who is sponsor
I
number
would
2?
say the other sponsor is Music Area. Music Area bags. Oh my God. How is ironic that we all have Music Area bags.
What a coincidence.
Unbelievable.
And we all had them
Area
right
bag.
now.
Yes. So they're amazing. So
How
they
did that
are.
get in there?
Oh, another nice plug. I like it. They actually just put out have a new website, musicarea.com, where you can order right online. They are in China. They're in very far from Wuhan. They definitely are. But we all met Scony Sue. We all met him at NAMM, and he couldn't have been a nicer guy.
This is the bag I fly with. I tuck my straps in.
Got it.
And then I literally will put my hand in here and carry it through. I kind of like that, like boop, 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 boop.
I think we are base case nerds because we really, all of us are working musicians. Yeah, just a little bit, right,
Just
John?
a little bit.
But we really, we require certain things in cases that some people don't get. And I won't mention the big one. One of the biggest, kind of missing some stuff, and these guys get it. For me, the dead giveaway, this handle is one of the most important for me, because when I'm going to my car, I want that front handle so I can put it in the front seat. And there's manufacturers out there that are like, oh, it's not a big deal. No, it's a big effing deal.
Yeah.
I definitely like being able to tuck straps.
Yep.
Because I'm in a tight room, so I want to be able to not have my straps get hung up on everything.
Yeah.
There is a boot on these.
And this is actually, I think I would say lower model, but I mean, what I like on this is just simplicity at its best, but at the same time, it's
Functional.
super, super sturdy.
John, what's the back of that look like?
The back of that's basically just like this. Now, it doesn't tuck the straps in, which is fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I do like it if you can, because I'll usually tuck one in and have just the other one over the shoulder.
Yeah.
But this is my my easy everyday, gotta grab and go to like the theater, drop it into the office or something like that. I'll just throw it into this bag here.
Yeah, they're doing it right. They do a lot of OEM for big boutique companies, and they have done that for a long time. So they are an OEM company.
Is there candy in yours?
What?
There was.
Dude, is that grandma candy? Is that you got a butterscotch in the?
Ooh.
I like the old. I like the old stale butterscotch better at the bottom of grandma's purse. Like, here, Sonny.
Well, it's constantly. This is like the a rehearsal bag all the time for me, and my flight bag, which is weird. I don't know how many bags I have.
Yeah.
And well, rehearsal's a tight area, so I'm like, always keep some mints.
Mm-hmm.
So we got musicarea.com and italiastraps.com. Was that right? Italia Straps?
Both wonderful companies. Check them out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
And feel free to mention,
Yeah.
the big bottom if you want.
Yep.
Yeah.
Please do.
Please mention when you go to and buy a lot of stuff from them. So yeah. All right, boys. How else are you guys doing? We're at the what is this right now? Today, May 13th. We're kind of in on this quarantine.
On the
COVID
slow
thing.
reopen, I guess.
GHS slow reopen. You guys are.
Today we were 100% back.
Nice.
So, and
Cool.
from what I've heard, kicking out strings left and right, doing what we can. So.
And Tony, you got good news for rehearsal.
I have gigs next week.
Nice.
Well, studio recordings.
Wow.
So I'm really happy. One of the big studios I work with is also associated with the School of Rock, and it's also associated to a large rehearsal complex. I've been recording there a bunch, and I'll be working over there again. So
That's awesome.
I'm real excited.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll see. I don't want to talk about too much about what's going to happen theater-wise. It could open. We'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah.
Cool.
Good, but it's looking up, which is great. Thankfully.
When I'm getting notifications about it, that means it's on someone's mind.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, and Southern California is slowly opening. I mean, it's it's good, and GNL is starting to ramp up, and cross the fingers, man. I think we're on the tail end of this.
I have a post specifically about this that I posted today. If you guys get a chance,
yeah,
I don't know if you read it.
I did, and then when I saw the song that you put on it, I was like, God damn, Tony, good call.
I love those guys. I love Fishbone.
Yeah. Oh, dude, so good, man. Well, cool, gentlemen. This was a little bit of a After Dark.
After Dark, Big Bottom.
After Dark. For us right now, it is 9:39 on the East Coast. Steve, it's like 6:39 out there.
And it's Buffalo
You're
Trace.
blurry.
It's Buffalo Trace. It's because the camera already had some Buffalo Trace too.
Buffalo Trace. They would be a good sponsor also, Buffalo Trace. We really like you.
Yeah, they're a favorite of mine.
We really like you guys. Hit us up, Buffalo Trace. We love you. It's the straight bourbon whiskey for the bass player, for the ever working bass player.
It's the bass player's whiskey.
Oh, by the way, hey John, I dig your hat.
Oh, thanks, man. I like yours too.
Hey, Ray Rondeau.
Oh my goodness.
Our last podcast, please check it out if you haven't. Listen to it, check it out. Ray Rondeau from Vintage Bass Vault and just badassery bass playing.
Oh, he's a badass human.
He was the best.
Yeah.
So good.
He's a badass human.
Yeah. But I gotta just give kudos to the Bergantinos. Jim and Holly couldn't be nicer. Just so nice, along with, Lee. Like, those guys are real deal, man. And I'm excited for the possibilities of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That right there for me is, man, I'm excited. Some of the shit that we were talking about, woo!
Unbelievable. Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah, it was very cool. So,
that's a guy that cares.
Yeah, you're right.
I like a company that cares.
Yeah.
And let's just stop recording right now. Ready, guys? Thanks so much. Check out the episode.
Check out the episode. The Bergantinos, Lee Presgrave, and just watch it.
Holly Bergantino.
Big freaking bottom. All right, enjoy. Goodbye. And hold on, guys. We're going to keep talking.
Okay, there we go.
And there we go. You guys all sound good. All right.
Boom.
So first and foremost, this is the Big Bottom crew, John Moody, Tony Puleo, Steve Arajo. And who do we have this time? Jim Bergantino and Lee Presgrave from Bergantino Amplifiers. So,
and wait a minute, come on over here.
and Holly. We got
And
Holly.
Yeah,
We can't forget Holly.
come on.
Awesome. I love it. I love you guys, man. Thank you for joining us. This is rad.
Our pleasure.
Yeah. And everybody can hear everything okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Cool. Okay, Tony was going to be.
Yeah, so
All right. Be recorded, rude.
I have to be rude, and John, quiet on that one. This is we just got to give you kudos, Jim, on one thing, like something vintage like that Steve and I always talk about. And Steve, why don't you start with it? Because we both own this cabinet, and it's been one of our favorites from all time.
HT322.
Oh,
Yep.
boy.
Amen. The
People
best
love
cabinet.
that. It's true.
It was by far one of the best. I think I actually had two, but obviously, through the things you sell, you buy, and that's one of the ones I regret getting rid of. That cabinet.
It's without fail that every NAMM show, I get guys that still come up and that's all they talk, if there's one cabinet that people talk about more than anything, it's the 322.
Yeah.
So,
What's your waist?
It's badass.
I've
Holly-
taken it to 36 out of the 50 states and beat the hell out of it.
it,
Love it.
It was, I mean, I personally probably boxed all of them. And it was the weight, obviously, with this,
Yes.
the current trends is everything lightweight, but that cabinet weighed a good upwards of 100 pounds.
Oh yeah,
Ooh.
I remember.
I think mine on a scale
Yeah.
was 96 pounds on the scale.
Was it nice? Okay, so yeah, just about right. Imagine taking that off a bench and putting it in a box.
Oof. And then climbing it up some stairs to a gig. There you go. I have guns.
Yeah.
But no, it was fantastic, and it was just a killing cab. It's up there with some of the cabs. I mean, up there with like a Ampeg 810. It's up there with like really these legendary cabinets. That HC322.
It was punchy.
Yeah,
It was
punchy AF,
punchy.
big time.
You had the punch for the tens, but it was also very piano-like in a way.
Yeah.
You know, and it didn't really hype anything. It was just very, I think, more neutral. Is that it?
I would call it detailed and punchy.
Okay.
That from the way I
Right.
know it.
I'm trying to, it's been a while, but it was definitely punchier than like our 212 cabinet because it had the tens in it.
Mhm.
Gave it that extra punch up top, and it had the real nice tweeter in it too, which really finished
Oh,
up. And so it was just a nice full range cabinet. I think it really got the spectrum really nice. And so, yeah, it was, we sold a lot of those, and but then the lightweight market came in, and it just was like, running, swimming against the tide almost at that point. So, but thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
What year did you discontinue that, Jim?
I had a guess. It was probably around 2007. I think 2008 is when we introduced the AE series, if I'm not mistaken. And it was right before that we discontinued the HT line, basically,
Mhm.
the 322.
Was that 310s really popular around that time? Yeah, it was
The 310. Well, the 310 we came out with at our inception with the 212. Those were our two big cabinets, and the reason why I did a 310 cabinet at the time was a couple of things. One, I didn't want to make a 410 size cabinet at the time, and I thought the 310, the woofers that we used had a nice excursion to them, so they essentially put out what a typical 410 cabinet could put out. And the other thing too is, being a smaller company at the time, what you try to do is amortize a lot of your parts over multiple products. So I keep the box sizes, the cabinet size, like the 212 was the same box as the 310, which allowed us to use the same grills, the same shipping cartons. So when you start having too many, if every model in your lineup used a different box, a different grill, you'd be choking on inventory of parts, because you can't just order them as you need them. You got to order them in quantity to get the right pricing. So if you notice over up until now, the history of my company, you'll see a lot of even modern day cabinets. Like even currently right now, in the same box, we have our HDN 212, our NXT 212, our NV 212, our HG 410. They all share the same grill, the same boxes. So part of my design philosophy has always been to maximize, parts and products for cost purposes. I mean, it just, if I can order, 150, 200 boxes of one size and get a quantity discount versus ordering 50 of those, and then have to stock them all, and it takes up space too. So, you just try to be as efficient as possible from a business perspective.
Well, it makes sense, and also makes sense for the gigging guy that wants to use two different boxes and stack them live.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
So,
point.
but yeah, so everything, there's a way to, when you have control over the whole process, right down to the driver design, you can make it work in these, like in other words, if I want to do another design in a specific size box, given the volume of that box, and if I want to change it from like 12s to 10s or whatever, I can design a driver from ground up that will work, efficiently in that particular cabinet. So, so it gives, as a designer, It allows me, and having the luxury of working with various transducer manufacturers to customize drivers to my specs. Part of it is to achieve a certain tone that I'm going after, and the other half is making it work within a certain cabinet size. So again, it gives you the efficiencies of manufacturing and also the ability to achieve the tonal goals you're trying to go after.
Nice.
That's great. I mean, you've always been innovative, always, which I think is amazing. I mean, I've always liked everything you've done, and I got this and I tested it, and unfortunately it was right. I literally only got to test this stuff on 2 gigs, and then the world went wacky. But this Bluetooth is rad. I told these guys I was like, he's got a Bluetooth foot switch. Like, this is badass. Like, this is a this is a duh that people should have done, and you nailed it. This is rad. It's amazing.
Well, there's a backstory to how it turned out to be a Bluetooth pedal.
Oh, okay.
When I was doing the B amp and explained to various people in the industry, some dealers, some industry insiders, or whatever, explained to them what the B amp was all about. And as you know, the B amp has memory locations and all that. And I said, "Do I need a foot pedal?" And every single one of them said, "No, we know, everything from our dealer said we never sell foot switches." And the industry people said, "No, you don't need a foot switch." Mm-hmm. And a week after we started shipping the B amp, these very same people said, "Do you have a foot switch?" and so here we are. I have all these thousands of dollars in metal work already done on, for the casing that doesn't have an. I designed the amp as compact as possible, so I left no room on the case or the circuit boards to put, input jack for a foot switch.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we had the USB port on the B amp for software upgrades and stuff, and we also have a microcontroller on there, and which does Bluetooth. And so we worked with, we worked with AirTurn on the pedal. It's their pedal, but my software engineer wrote the software to interface the foot switch through the dongle into our amp. It goes through our microcontroller, and thus we were able to, after the fact, incorporate a foot switch after everybody initially that they didn't need one. So
no, I think it's fantastic. And then obviously there's this design, especially, okay, so you worked with the AirTurn people. So eventually this little foot switch could be, okay, control that, but it could also control maybe an iPad with the turning. I mean,
well, that foot switch, because it's an AirTurn, it can work with, an iPad, it can do MIDI. So you don't have to utilize it, so people can, use it for multi-purpose it if they wanted to. If they're using something else, like if you go to
yeah, no, I have because I use I haven't printed music since the iPad came out. Everything is on my iPad. So anything you can use an AirTurn pedal with, because that's what that is. What you can use with your iPad, you can use your MIDI stuff.
Steve.
Ooh, now
Jim sent me a firmware update last week, and the foot switch was turning my overhead fan on and off.
That's awesome.
I need one for the blender next.
Yeah, the blender. Okay, so.
Oh man, Steve's left one now. It starts the coffee maker and.
Coffee maker. This is exactly. Dishwasher. No, but oh my god. So that's badass.
In fact, what happened was we initially started with the PED Pro that they had, which was not, there was some issues where it didn't have the feel as a typical foot switch. So a lot of guys that bought that early on, when we went to this pedal, they're now using it for page turners, and they can, then use this for their amps. So,
well, I love the feel of this. This feels better than a lot of those other turners, because a lot of the page turners are a little rubber. They're kind of a pain in the ass.
Well, they're like a membrane switch.
Correct.
And that's what we had initially. And then they came out with this pedal. Plus, it has 4 switches versus 2. So we were able to, rather than double up, we were able to have individual functions. They also have a 6-switch version of it. So
My mind is blown.
yeah, and the nice thing about the whole architecture of the B amp and the HP there is that because we have a microcontroller and it's digitally controlled, I mean, we can change the user interface with a software update. And even the audio aspect of it, because all the audio is done digitally in the DSP. So, we've added, I mean, Tony would know this because he, when he came by the booth in 2015, we made it to the NAMM show by the seat of our pants, which is typical when introducing a new product.
Yeah.
It was just an amp with tone controls, et cetera. And it didn't have the tuner working. It didn't have any of the, the compressor and the effects came a year or so later, and that was just an afterthought. So that wasn't even on the original design doctrine, if you will. And the more I learned what the power of what we had at our fingertips with the DSP, the more features we were able to add over time, thus all the firmware updates. Plus, another great benefit of that architecture for us and for our customers is we've been able to learn a lot or get a lot of feedback from users as to things that they like, things that they may have liked to do differently, or things that it didn't have that they could have used. And through all the feedback and input with early adopters and as well as even recent customers, a lot of the updates have been based, in many ways on a lot of that user feedback. So our customers have helped us make it a better product. And the person that bought the amp 5 years ago has the same amp that we're shipping today because it's all software based and it's just a firmware update. And no one had to go out of their way. You didn't have to, sell something and buy something to get the latest version. It's just like you have a thumb drive and a computer, you're up and running. And it's been, so it's been a great benefit for our customers and nice for us to be able to say to our customers, you didn't, by coming on first, you didn't lose out.
Sure.
And so it's been a great.
John, what were you were going to say something before? Sorry if I interrupted.
Oh, I was going to say, just thinking about that is thinking about if you can split the pedal. So then you have like the left two switches control the amp, the right two control your page turner on your iPad. Because I'd use that setup in theater pits every day.
Oh yeah.
Oh, good to know.
That's good. Well, I could possibly have the amp software ignore those two switches and maybe just have then you'd have to probably just pair it with your page turner as well. I mean,
Right.
Maybe a way to do it because software you can pretty much do anything. So, we obviously recognized all four switches with the amp, but let's say you needed, let's say you had the HP where the first two switches are the drive, engage, and the punch, but you didn't, you say, well, I don't need to engage the bright.
Sure.
Engage the bright or the mute. I can do that manually if I wanted to. I could easily have my software ignore those right two switches.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
A matter of, can you pair the same pedal with two different devices?
Yeah.
Right.
That's going to be, I'm not a big Bluetooth guy myself. That's a little out of my, how the in depth that goes. But I know that it can be, sometimes you got to be careful. Like there's open pairing, so and closed pairings, which this pedal is capable of. So it's a good question. I mean, I could always run it by ear turn if it ever came to be such that. But they also, just in general, because air turn also makes now 6-foot switch pedals, so we could leave the other two open for MIDI interfaces and page turners, like you're mentioning, provided that it can pair with multiple devices.
Right. Right.
Right now, we're essentially pairing it with the dongle that we plug into our USB port. So that's essentially another device, but they do offer open and closed pairing. So I can look into that. That's a good question.
I love it. It's awesome, man. And then Lee, you said with the updates, you said you just got an update right now and you updated one of your amps, the ones that you have?
I update probably 10 to 30 times.
That's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question.
I've worn out 3 thumb drives.
Got it.
Well,
Okay.
tell him why.
Lee wakes up every morning and checks his inbox for updates.
Updates.
I know sooner. Jim's, yeah, we're good. That's it. We're done. It's perfect. I'm like, yes, it's perfect. We don't need to do anything. I'll wake up the next day. Hey, I thought of something. Try this. I was like, oh.
I love it.
No, but I love to do it, honestly. So
and
I've saved every update Jim has sent me over the last close to 3 years, and I keep threatening to actually count it up one day, but it's hundreds and hundreds, if not close to thousands of updates.
Well, in all seriousness, though, the cool thing about this architecture with the updatability of it is Lee is in Virginia and I'm here in Massachusetts. And in the course of 30 minutes, we can test, 10, 15 circuits back and forth, just by making slight, like, especially when we're doing the drives, how we're going to, set it up. Because it's, drive is like making a sauce or a soup. You can always, there's so many different flavors you can make based on how you, do the circuit. So, I can send Lee a circuit. He can, literally, however long it takes to take a file off a laptop on a thumb drive, takes 10 seconds to load it into the amp. You can play for a couple of minutes, say, try this, or this is what I'm hearing, this is where I'd like to take it. I'll be back at my computer, dial up a few more things, email it down to him. So literally, in the course of a half hour or an hour, we can easily go through 10 plus iterations of a audio circuit. And that's how we've been developing, and that's been led to all these updates over the last months and years, just back and forth. No soldering iron needed.
That's fantastic. So two thoughts that just came across my feeble little brain here. A lot of amp companies will cater towards a certain style, a stylistic, and your amps have always really hit all styles, everything from super clean jazz to metal, which I love that. I love that your amps cover so much ground, and they always have. You've never shied away. And I don't know if it's an intentional thing or whatever, but some amp companies really, it favors a certain style or a certain way of playing. And your amp, it literally covers. You've got guys that play super hard rock, and you got guys that play searing metal with distortion, and you have super clean, So I think that's fantastic that it covers that ground.
It's a good question and topic of discussion, because actually, even before I did the amplifiers, that was kind of how our speakers were known for.
Yeah.
And I always would say to people, there's no such thing as a rock speaker, or a jazz speaker, or a metal speaker. A speaker's job is to reproduce accurately, or as accurately as possible, whatever you're putting into it. So a speaker should not corner you or box you into a certain specific genre of music. It should reproduce the genre you're playing through it. And the same goes for an amp, really. It's really my goal in speakers and amps is to try to make it as much of an open window back to you, the artist, to, like a blank canvas, if you will, so that you can just basically convey what you're trying to do to the audience and to the recording, et cetera. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of amps on the market that people will say, it's like, it gives you two choices, take it or leave it, in a way, because, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's just like they have a baked in tone, and no matter how you EQ it, it's always going to sound like that baked in tone, just EQ'd. Yeah. And so that tone is either going to work for you or it isn't. Whereas what we try to do is give you an amp and speaker system that is neutral and open as possible, like a blank canvas, so that you can build your tone on it, through your bass, your fingers, your string, the EQs I try to make pretty versatile. Then when we took the amp especially a step further with all the profiles, where we EQ the speakers flat for you, so that, again, because I always feel, this is another interesting aspect of this whole conversation too, is the reason why it took us so long to come out with an amp back in 2008 or 7 or something, like somewhere in that time frame, when we came out with the Intelligent Power series of cabinets, the IP series, which were our powered cabinets. they had a DSP processor built in, and it allowed me to use the same amp module, but EQ it differently for that amp, for that speaker. So you could start flat and then again build your tone on that blank canvas. And I never wanted to do an amplifier until I could, and the shortcoming of that system essentially was, if you needed more than one speaker, you'd have to buy another amplifier because it was built into the speaker. Plus then you have to still buy a preamp. And we also had another issue where a lot of these preamps out there are voiced. So here I am giving you a perfectly balanced system, and if someone plugs in, you know, let's say an amplifier, a preamp rather, with a passive tone stack where they think 12 o'clock is flat, which it isn't. And then they're wondering why the woofers are like coming through the grill. So it's like, I've already done all that for you. So we didn't have control of the end user's experience because they had to buy a preamp to plug into it. And then users that needed more than one cabinet, they'd have to obviously pay for another amplifier. So the premise of the B-amp was the profiles. In other words, it has the profiles where no matter what speaker of ours you use, you could engage the profile for that particular speaker into the DSP section of the amp that's dedicated to the profiles. So you weren't limited. You didn't have to, you know, no matter what speaker you had, the amp could match it. And that was kind of like what started the whole B-amp process. But then everything else with all the feature set, the compressor, the effects, the quasi-parametric EQs, what else do we do? We have a programmable bright. You know, you can choose the bright frequency and the gain. It has a built-in tuner.
High pass, low pass filter, right?
Yeah, high pass, yeah. Thanks for reminding me what my amp does.
You got it. well, the reason I bring that up is that I've never had an amp that had that particular. Maybe trying to think back, maybe something, but it's very intuitive. And Lee, when this was sent out, I talked to Lee, and I think I had it kind of set wrong. And he told me, I'm like, oh, that's it. So, anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's good.
That was such a rad feature. I loved it. Sorry.
Well, see, the nomenclature confused a lot of people. Even one of my dealers who's an engineer, he said, this amp sounds very MIDI. And I'm like, well, where's the low pass and high pass? So he confused low pass with high cut and high pass with, you know, so it's just how the terminology of it. So he basically was cutting all the highs and cutting all the lows. so I could have, so some people confuse very, low pass filter with it's the same thing as a high cut.
Yeah.
So, and they get confused by that. And so that's why some of the updates, I put a graph in there showing how each control affects the frequency response.
Sure.
But anyways, so probably
Sounds like that would be a good video. That would be a good video to have explaining,
Yes, you're right.
That's what, we've been trying, I don't know, and they think I talk too much. I don't know where they get that impression from.
I love it. It's awesome.
Almost try because you say that.
He's from Massachusetts. Of course he talks a lot, all right?
I thought it was the fact that my name ended up in a vowel. I don't know. I just, but I truly believe the B-amp, and we have some nice videos out there. One of the things that the goals in mind with the B-amp, because I know it looks at first glance to some as intimidating, but it's very intuitive. It's very, a lot of the menus that are, when I say deeper in the amp, you just got to like press and hold the program button to get to them, are more or less set and forget items, unless you're changing like your speaker out, or one day you may want to go post versus pre-DI to the board. But for the most part, those things you just set up at home and you forget about it. And the other stuff, which is basically your tone controls, are right there on the front of the amp. So, I try to make it so that from a live gigging situation, everything you need is no different than a typical amp. And even like the sub-berry stuff like the compressor and the effects, they are in a menu screen, but once you get your sound, you can save it to a memory location, and all you have to do is either push one of the knobs in the front of the amp or the foot switch, and it just and the memory scene saves the gain of each tone control. It also saves the center frequency of each tone control, because you can go in there and decide what center frequency you want for that particular tone control. It will save whether the compressor's on or off, and also the drive and makeup gains. It will save whether or not the effects are on or off, which effect is selected, the drive and makeup gain. It will also save whether or not the bright is engaged. It will save the bright frequency you programmed for that scene. It will save the bright gain you saved for that scene. So you can completely set up, it'll save the low pass filter frequency, so that if, for a particular bass or style of music, you may want to low pass it, or if you're using like the fuzz, let's say, and you don't want to get all those upper harmonics, you can bring the low pass filter down a bit, but and save it all part of that. And just at the push of a button, it will recall that whole set. And what's interesting, getting back to it just quickly, I don't want to get too long-winded here, but the reason why on the bright switch, we decided on a memory save to be able to save not just whether or not the bright was on or off, but what frequency and gain it was at. I had a customer call me and said, Jim, I have like 2 different basses, and one, I think one was a jazz bass and one maybe a P bass or more, whatever. And he's like, I use 2 different bright setups for each bass. It would be nice if you could not just save the fact that the bright is engaged, but also what frequency and gain that particular bass was set up for.
Wow.
I didn't look at it that way. So I got together with my software engineer. I said, let's, when you do a save, don't just save whether or not the bright is engaged, but whatever frequency and gain is set at that particular time, save that. And that's how, so that gets back to about how hearing back from users and customers as to how they using the amp allowed me the opportunity to make it better. And then because people that bought it 5 years ago have that it's because of the architecture, didn't lose out on that. They were able to be brought up to date with all these features that were changed or added based on customer feedback. So I learned a lot from my customers. You know what I mean? It's allowed me to make the amp better for their uses. And, so that's how the amp evolved, basically.
I love it. I love it that you actually, you listen to the customers, you listen to the players, because sometimes that, some companies don't. And so it's great.
I think one of my biggest assets, quite honestly, is the fact that I don't play. So, two things. Not that it forces me, but it makes me want to listen to players, because I don't have a preconceived notion as to what it should sound like or what it should do. And I always joke, and the good thing is that at least I'm not testing my gear to make me sound good, because then it would sound like crap, right? I mean, but it keeps it more objective for me, and it allows me to listen rather than just try to predict or anticipate what people want.
That's cool.
I had a question, Jim. Have you thought about taking the guts of that? You have a lot of intelligent design that's a little bit different than some of the other amplifier companies, and actually doing it in a pedal format. So minus an amplifier, but just having it in a pedal.
Actually, we are looking into that, because we have got a lot of requests on that. Now, it's kind of an interesting debate, or here I am, I think about this a lot. And when you think about, like, let's just take the B amp. It weighs 6.5 pounds. It's pretty small even for a micro amp with the 700, 800 watt amps, because we were able to make the package pretty compact. And one of the a lot of the people that have been actually asking me about this, can you put it in a pedal form or a preamp? It's just a preamp part of it. And I kind of look at the situation. I'm like, you have an amp that fits in your gig bag. It's only weighs 6 pounds.
Oh, wait.
And you can still use it as a preamp, and you already own it. So, but again,
there's a reason for this, actually, and I can
all right, go ahead. I'm all ears.
I love this.
So, like John and I both do theater. It's quite common to play in ampless situations. I did a tour years ago in Europe where I was told ahead of time, this is an ampless situation, we're low on cargo. Now, granted, the amp yourself is small, it doesn't weigh much, but guys are literally bringing a pedal board and their instrument over their back. So the whole pedal board format, it's kind of in right now, so to speak, trend-wise. You know, it's there, it's happening. Lee, you know, you see it, right?
Yeah, and I agree, Tony, because you know, yeah, it's all in the B amp, but you can make it even smaller, and that's gooder. And you're not paying for a power amp you're never going to use, or you might have a power amp. You might be a Crest CA9 guy or a lightweight Crown 1U guy, and you just want to mate it to your own power amp, so you don't need a redundant power amp, so you don't have to, you know, you'll get the price point down by not having to pay for the whole amp, you know?
Oh, and I appreciate all that feedback, because I've been hearing it from all sides. That I try to look at it from sometimes more of a efficiency, or just like it's almost like I feel guilty having people own a B amp and then go out and buy a pedal. You know what I mean? It's like it's all right there, and I know that there's a little added convenience that Tony mentioned. Getting the weight down even more and getting it a little smaller. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm learning from feedback that that is something people would like to see. And so, yeah, I'm definitely.
I'd like to show you something if I can, right? So
Is he showing his pedal board again? Because he always does that.
Of course he is. Wait. The over-under was a half hour. We're a little over. It took him that long.
No, this is a. You're so bad, Steve.
I know. I'm sorry.
This is like a common setup.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Temple Audio.
Temple Audio, very common setup you'd find. A lot of pit guys, in New York, Boston, it's what's being used. A lot of guys traveling, there are a lot of they're ampless. So there is a crowd of guys that are ampless situations. So even if you did have the power amp, but you had all the controls and push buttons facing up, so the amp, type of
it's a package that's better adaptable to a pedal board, like you say. Actually, just the other day, I had a guy who owns a B amp say, let me know when the preamp version of it's coming out, because he's afraid people will step on his knobs if he put it up on the stage up by where he's playing, stuff like that. So, I mean, it's just learning and understanding the needs of a gigging musician, because like I said a little while ago, I'm not one of those. And so I'm kind of like learning as I go. And by, again, from feedback from people like yourself, and helps me hit the target coming out better,
So John will tell you, I think he's using a pedal all the time now, right?
Oh yeah, it's like half my gigs is just, and it's like a board about half Tony's size with a multi-effects on one thing going right into a pedal DI, and that goes straight to the front of the house.
And you use PAs typically, or just the PA monitor?
I have a monitor right in front of me, so just like whatever a Yamaha PA speaker is. So it's enough. It gets the job done. And I mean, I use also the backbeat thing that goes on the back of my strap, so that helps too. And but yeah, that's basically the rig. And yeah, like Tony says, walk in with my bass and my little gig bag. 5 minutes, I'm set up and already got a signal to the house and ready to go. So,
I believe me, I hear a lot of that lately. We were just up in Brooklyn last fall, and people, saying that they don't even own an amp. Some
Mitch
of them,
Starkman.
so
Mitch Friedman.
because they're working in the city, everything ears or whatever, and so they don't even carry an amp. They just carry a good DI preamp, and running they are.
It's
Quiet
common.
stages are really, becoming the norm these days. So yeah, it makes sense. That's just where, the industry's been going there for a few years now, and I think it's not going to let up. It's going to continue to go that way. because the loud amps are just poking holes in the front of the house, and the engineers aren't really having it anymore. They want to control that, you know?
Right.
Quite common in Europe. In Europe right now, even in the States, in the smaller clubs, I know, like we all know Killian Duarte. His last couple of tours he's done, completely, ampless. It's just, it's in ears. I think there is still like a little stuff coming through the monitors, but it's literally a pedal board, a small pedal board.
Well,
That's it.
it's all impulse responses. Kemper's.
Right.
So on that note, Jim, do you work with any, or have you thought of working some kind of IRs into that? I mean, it could. I don't know. It could.
Well, we're currently put on. It's a good thing. Nice to bring it up. Actually, we are in the process of generating IRs for some of our new speakers. So because the NXTs, which we just came out with this year, and that was a collaboration with Celestion. We're going to be doing impulse responses on those, and so guys can download those. They can purchase them. We haven't figured out yet, but we're going to have them professionally done, and because the NXTs have got, even though we went from NAMM to this essentially this lockdown situation. But everyone that's had them so far has absolutely loved them, and we're very happy about them. Lee's been very instrumental in the testing of them and got his stamp of approval. And so I think from an IR perspective, I think they'll make a great addition to the people's libraries. And so yeah, we're definitely going to get the ball rolling on those. Actually, we're going to be working with Celestion on those. So it'll be done really nice.
Man, an IR of the HT322.
Well, to go back to that, preamp thing, that would sell it.
Yeah.
Because you'd have this thing on your board that's like, look, you can dial up your exact Bergantino amp setup that you use normally. That just goes right to the front of the house.
Yep. Right. Well, that would be a nice thing.
It's in the works. Like, all right, it's in the works.
We're just filling you with ideas because this market, Jim, is not, and Lee will attest to this, it's not going away.
I know that. It's funny. It took me a while to really have it sink in. You know what I mean? And really, and even to some extent, fully understand it. But yeah, I'm starting to realize. But it's also, it's twofold. One, it's for the reasons that most people are using it for your studios and even touring, and but also I look at it as like a cross marketing where it can get more people familiar with the brand through the IRs, because when they hear what our speakers sound like, or amps for that matter, with IRs, if they do need a speaker, some of them may just be using them in their studio, but when they go live, they may need a amp and cab. So if they like what they hear in the studio with the IRs of a given cabinet, my hope or thoughts are they'll have a tendency to, if they needed a speaker for live, that they would go for the IR, or the speaker of the IR that they desired in the studio. And also, there's a lot of studios out there that they're not specific for bass players, but I'm sure they'll have IRs available for bass players that do come in to record. And if, what's to say a bass player doesn't happen to hear one of our IRs in a recording situation and say, well, what's that? And then maybe learn of the brand that way too. So it works on so many levels, and it makes a lot of sense.
That's awesome. Well, I think what you've created, being software based, I mean, you've kind of already created the infrastructure for this, which is amazing. I mean, I'm excited about it. That's awesome.
I like the idea of an IR for the 322. Woof.
Thank you very much.
You're not going to stop, Jim.
Thank you very much. Well, and the other,
I have to find one. Do you guys have one still?
Well,
I don't know.
I don't.
You don't have one?
I'm going to start hunting one down. I'll put one on a search.
They come up every now and then.
They do, but they're rare.
They are very rare.
People hang on to
That's Ryan's favorite.
Yeah, like I said, we sold a lot. I mean, those were back in the day where dealers would call up and order 3 or 4 at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like, give me 4 322s. I'm like, really?
That's 400 pounds of cabinets right there.
Yeah. So but that was, they definitely, that was a good day for us. That a good part.
It's awesome. So okay, we're gonna be on the hunt for an HC 322. We'll get
now.
Yes. So Jim, when did you start getting into the Class D thing? And for me, it's a love-hate, and I'm sure all of us, because a lot of the times when you play Class D, there's an anemic feeling to it. There's a lot of it. So you don't, and all of us can attest to, you want to feel that note. You want to play and you want to feel it. And a lot of times Class D can be a bit anemic, and this is not. This is the first time I played it, it has heft. And it's just one of those things, you can't really explain it. You just have to play it and you feel it. So when did you kind of get into the Class D thing, and was it a love-hate? Did you like it right away? Did you not like it?
Well, the first Class D experience I had, and I asked the same questions, because when we did the IP series, like I was mentioning earlier, they had one of the earlier Bang & Olufsen ICE modules, the 1,000-watt module in them, which is still, it's still by today's standards a nice module. And my biggest question was, how do these sound compared to your typical Class, AB type amplifier or lead sled or whatever you want to call it? And so we tried one, and was it a Crest CA9? No, but it didn't really leave you wanting. You know what I mean? It didn't make you say, ah. So it was definitely an acceptable alternative. And obviously, with the weight savings and the fact that it had the DSP built in, it allowed us to get into that market. I agree. I mean, the same thing, quite honestly, kept me out of the Neo market for a longest period of time. I mean, people kept asking me about lightweight. When are you going to make lightweight? And I said, back then it was like never, because it's
when they don't sound like shit. How is that?
Well, I did try some of the earlier Eminence Neos and wasn't happy with them at all. And but one day it just came to a realization that, in fact, it was interesting. A lot of guys that were good customers of ours were going off and buying these lightweight Neos from other manufacturers. And then I'd follow them, and then I'd see all of a sudden they'd sell it and they come back to the heavier ceramics. And I was kind of like hanging my hat on that for a while, but then I realized some guys just weren't coming back anymore because they're like, can't give up on this lightweight. The weight difference is, even though I'm not happy with the sound, it's like I just can't lug the weight around anymore. So I came to the realization that as a company, if we want to still be in the game, we have to come out with a lightweight design. And our AE series was the first Neo cabinet we did. And believe me, I worked hard on those because at the time I was working with the Eminence Neos, and I was having trouble with getting them to sound good. And so one day, once I made the determination, okay, I need a Neo speaker out there, I sat down and I really said, okay, why aren't these sounding good? Why are they acting the way they're acting? And I came up with a design concept for the A series that made them, that basically the cabinet actually offset their shortcoming to make them sound less Neo, if you will. And when we introduced the AE series, the feedback we were getting from the field is they were the first Neo speaker that sounded the least Neo. And believe me, I did a lot of real, that the AE series made me basically rethink how speakers are designed just to get it to sound good. I never designed a speaker, even to this day, the way I had to design the AE series to get them to sound good. And they're still even lauded today, but there's a lot of, it made me turn everything I believed about how a speaker should properly be designed on its head. So, but fortunately, over the years we've moved, we've been working with other Neo speakers that allow me to go back to my more traditional way of thinking. But the latest line of the NXTs that we were just talking about was because, Neo, I mean, it's come a long ways, but like I've always said, a lot of people say, well, a magnet is a magnet is a magnet. It's not about the magnet. It's about the magnetic field and the material and how the speaker responds to that magnetic field and all the other things and non-linearities as well. So just saying this magnet is the same strength as this magnet has nothing. You have to look at the whole system and how it works together. And I always said that until we rethink how we design the Neo motor, we'll get Neo to sound anywhere near like ceramic. It's always going to be that divide, because even up until recently, people still are comparing. Here we are, like, what, 19, 20 years later, and still comparing new Neo designs with their ceramic counterparts.
Yeah.
People haven't let go of that ceramic sound. And back in 2018, so guys from Celestion, I know the sales rep very well. He actually lives in the town I grew up with now, but he was with BNC when I first started, and that's where we got our tweeters from for the HT series, et cetera. And he's been after me for quite some time since he's been with Celestion to switch over to Celestion speakers. And, I've been quite happy and still, have been with the BNC Neos that we've been using in the HDN series and the HG series. So this goes back to 2018, the fall, and, we was in town and we worked right down the street from EAW and Fulcrum Acoustics. So we're all in that same complex. And, so he had his marketing director in from the UK. We set up a meeting and, we went in and I was going to I figured the meeting was going to go like, hey, good to see you. What do you want to do for lunch? I'm all set. Don't need anything. Let's move on. And, but I guess me being me, I just kept talking, right? So, and then we got to a point where in the conversation where it kind of took a bit of a turn where I started going on with about, this is why I believe Neos will never sound the same as ceramics. And until we can do this to a Neo motor or something along these lines, it will always be that way. And I gave them kind of my thoughts as to what we needed to do to a Neo motor to get it more in line with how a ceramic motor performs. And they went back to the UK, and Paul Corker, who's their director or head of engineering there, liked what I was saying, and he personally took an interest in it. And he designed our NXT motors, and that's now what's in our NXT speakers. It's a modified Neo motor to give you, and it's kind of worked out. It didn't. The goal was to get it to sound like ceramic, but in many respects, I think we did a little one better in that we captured about 90% of the ceramic sound, but we maintained that nice upper mid clarity that Neos are known for. Because a lot of people, especially in a low volume environment, when they compare ceramics to Neos, their ears a lot of times will gravitate towards the Neos because it has that, that clear immediacy in the upper mids that really jumps off the bass. Your bass kind of jumps right out. Whereas the ceramics, a lot of times you don't really appreciate what they're doing until you start digging in and really, hitting them with some power. So the NXTs kind of worked out in a nice way where you can dig in and not feel like, if I give it any more power, it's going to, the white flag is going to come out of the port. But it also maintains that nice upper mid clarity that Neos are known for. So it gives you a real nice full spectrum from the low mids all the way up to the upper mids of a nice balanced filled in sound. You don't feel like there are any holes in it. You don't feel like it's responding differently, or you don't feel like you have to, play it differently. You can just play, because there's nothing worse, whether it be playing through an amp that you feel doesn't have the headroom that you need, or a speaker that you feel is going to give in or give out if you really dig in. There's nothing like a system that you feel that will respond to what you want to your playing without you feeling like you have to play to the rig that you're playing through. Because music is dynamics, and you're artist, and you like to, and through how you hit a string, how you play a note, is all about expression, and you want your system, your amplification system, to respond to that. You don't want to feel like you're working your expression or artistic expression around the limitations of your system. And so the goal in all this is to be able to have an amplification system that will respond to you, not a system that you have to, work around its limitations.
Oh, you're muted, Tony.
I muted myself just to. Jim, when you talk about the upper mids, are you talking about like 2.5K in that realm?
Yeah, like 1 to 3K, let's say. Yeah. That's another thing that took me a while to figure out. When bass players used to talk about mids, they'd be down to 50 hertz. I'm like a hi-fi guy where I'm like, well, what do you mean that it's scooped at 1K? So it took me a while to understand what you guys were referring to as the mid-range of the, the mid-range of the instrument. But Tony, to answer your question, it's to me, the upper mids in the 800 to 2.5 is okay. Like, and the mids are more in the 200 to 1K. And when everyone has, I think, a different way of defining a frequency range. I think of like hertz area is more like the low to mid bass rather, and obviously below that is the lower bass. So, but yes, that's another thing that over the years it's kind of like trying to translate what somebody is saying and knowing, understanding what they're referring to, because someone's upper mids or mids could be another guy's mid bass or something like that. So
I always think 2.5 in that rough area. Granted, it depends on what's going on, but when I'm working with a producer or anyone in the studio, I'm like, I want to see that area, because that's where I know for a lot of bass players, I'm going to use just an active jazz bass as an example. That's where the pop is, right? 2.5. You want to cut right there. You know what I mean? That's where you're gonna. That's where you got. When I say cut, you're gonna cut through the mix.
Tony, when we were developing the HP bright switch, it's selectable between 7K, that slap bright. But we purposely put the other bright at 2K, for a P bass, jazz bass. That just gives you that ping that you can just hear that presence pop through. A mix. So that's why
I call it a musical ping, Lee. Like like you said, like 2.5 on a jazz bass with round wounds, right there,
agree.
without being
obnoxious.
Beautiful. Yeah, exactly. Like that's the magic spot right there.
Yeah.
Well, I give Lee a lot of credit because he was very instrumental in the and not so much just the feature set, but the frequencies, like that 2K bright. In fact, when we were at the first NAMM show that we introduced the HP at, Lee was meeting with, talking to a lot of the guys that come through the booth. And even Tom Bolus was by there, and Lee was specifically, like you were saying, Tony, that that 2K region is everything to a P bass, a jazz bass. And a lot of guys never looked at it that way. But then when we hit the bright button, everyone, that's where, they were, then now they were able to actually hear what you're talking about. In other words, no one realizes how much they really appreciate or desire that area to have certain, like a P bass or a jazz bass to really cut through in a nice way. In fact, Remco, Lee, if you remember, was playing in the booth that first year, and he was just asking for, he was just like, I need a little more, I forget what it was, but all of a sudden Lee just hits the 2K bright. It's like, that's it.
Well, like Tony said, he was playing a jazz bass and he just couldn't get the right tone. He was getting ready to do a demo. And I just said, well, just what do you want? He said, I need that ping. And I just hit the bright, and he goes, oh, yeah, okay, there it is. Yeah. So nice to have on tap quickly.
Lee, which, you got all the cabs there. What's kind of your go-to gigging rig? What do you gravitate towards? I mean, probably a few different things.
I play smaller venues. I do occasionally play outside where I need to grab the ONV 412, or I can take a combination of things, but mainly I'll take the NXT 212 or the two NXT 112s. And it kind of lets me be modular, or at times I could take a 212 and put a 112 on top. Just depends on kind of how much push I need. But I really like of the NXT line, my ear really gravitates towards the 12s. They just have this upper mid presence. They're a little bit more relaxed than the 10s, but they're not slow by any means. They just have a just nice rock and roll push and pull to them, if you will. And they just do something in the upper mids that the 10s don't. The 10s are kind of more of an even tone. The 12s, you can kind of think of it, it's almost like conversely of what normally would be, but the 12s just do it for me. So they're my go-tos.
The 312 cab that I used literally only on the 2 gigs, I mean, it was fantastic. And I love the footprint of it.
It's small.
It's small.
And the speaker in the back.
Yeah, and super easy to carry around. I mean, it just was fantastic. And
What is that model again? What's the model with the 312?
HG.
That's the HG series. That's the one with the woofer in the rear.
Yeah, HG 312, is that the model?
Yes.
Yeah. Holographic.
HG.
And that's what you're using. That size box is what's common right now.
So that's our 212 box, but it's got 312s in it. It's also a sealed cabinet, so it's a little different design in that. In the low end, it's sealed versus ported.
I like it.
212s in the front, and it has one on the back, which gives a wider, sound stage. It helps. I always analyze it or analogize it to like a light, like a floodlight versus a spotlight. Typical front firing speakers are like a spotlight where all the sound and energy is directed forward. When you put that third speaker on the rear, it's more of a floodlight in that rather than being all in one direction, it kind of gives a nice even distribution of sound around the stage. And again, the feedback from a lot of the players out there that were first wondering how's this going to work, or they thought that someone was going to look at it and say, "What's that speaker firing at my head doing?" and all that. But everybody would comment afterwards how well they heard the bass, and not because it was overpowering, but because it was filling.
It's still tight at the same time. It's not this big booming. It's tight and clear.
Well, that's the seal design too. That helps down low too. So it's got a lot going on in that cabinet. You got the wide dispersion, but then you got a sealed cabinet, which gives you that tighter, more defined low end, and it's also got our reference tweeter in there, which is a nice tweeter too. So
fantastic.
It covers the range nicely. Yeah.
Could that box hold a 12 and 2 10s in the front?
Did you get in my head again?
And could it be called the HG322?
How many of them?
It'd have to have, that works. Yeah.
No, I've actually. It's funny. Like I'm trying to figure out ways, because we have the 312, the 412, and the HG 410 at NAMM, and Lee was there too. And you were too, Steve. I don't know if you did that when we did the ABC comparison and all that.
Oh, I don't know. No.
They're really nice too, what the 10s brought to the table. In fact, a really nice sounding rig was the HG 410 combined with the 312, because the 12s just gave you that real nice thick low mid, and the 10s just filled in that upper mid nicely too. So it got me thinking about some kind of combination of 12 and 10 mixture and an HG format. And so, that is floating around out there somewhere.
Good.
Hey, Steve, we talked about this too. What's nice about the HG series and the rear firing driver, especially if you're a guy playing smaller rooms, and you end up standing, on top of your cab basically, and you've got all your sound cooking past your knees, and inevitably you it turns into volume wars, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you can find a hard surface wall, it bounces that sound up. It basically gives you a second pathway of sound to your ear, so you can hear yourself so well in that environment when you're right on your cab where you couldn't before. That's what I really, so if I'm playing a really tight room, I'll usually grab an HG for that reason.
Well, the two gigs, the first gig was an outdoor gig, and then the second one was the coach house.
Right.
So I use that. That's a big place. And the other thing is the DI. I always like post EQ because I like to hear whatever's going on. I like it. I don't like pre. I like post, and it just sounds fantastic. The DI sounds killing. I love this thing. It just has, again, it has nice weight.
Thanks, Steve.
It's really good. So kudos. Because I mean, all of us, John, Tony, and I know Lee, I mean, we're nerds when it comes to just recording and recording direct, and having a good DI on an amp is a must. You know, you have to have it. So
They're not all created the same.
They're not.
In the amp world. They vary greatly.
There's
It's interesting to follow along with all these products out there and everyone's take on sometimes very similar things.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that helps us out, because the only analog circuitry in that amplifier is the front end buffer and the output buffers that are driving the module. All the EQing, all the effects, all the compressors, all the, everything else is done digitally. And the nice thing about that is that everything is preserved in the digital world. Now, whatever comes, so if you use a high quality buffer coming in, once it gets into the digital world, it's preserved. So, and then you're just sending it out through another quality buffer to the amplifier or to the direct to the DI. So you're not losing a lot of that. The more analog circuitry you put in a circuit, and the other thing too is, back in the days of tube design, when you design with tubes, you're forced to use higher quality components because of the higher voltages, like things like capacitors and stuff like that. When you go down into the solid state world, you can get away with a 10-cent cap purely from a function standpoint, versus spending a couple of dollars on a capacitor because you only need a 10-volt cap versus a 200-volt cap. And so, but what we did with what I've always believed in, and what we did is, we're using the more expensive caps in the signal path to preserve the quality of the sound. We're not trying to, we all have to keep our eye on the final cost of the system, but I'm willing to spend an extra buck or two on a capacitor to get, you're not going to get 10 times better sound. There's a difference between something sounding like good enough versus sounding more like your bass, more natural. It's subtle, but it's real.
Yeah.
And we hear the capacitance and the cables, like you guys are working with Tsunami now.
Yeah.
There's a total difference with the capacitance and the cables.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the capacitance of the cable, but it's the dielectrics that are used in the wiring and all that. So there's so many. There you go.
All of us with our.
We'll be very happy. We'll have to tag Keith in this one.
Oh yeah, Keith. Keith is the man. Look at that.
Shout out to Keith.
But that's
so.
When we heard that,
but there's enough can't be stated. It's the little things that all add up into the difference between something just sounding like what I say, one-dimensional versus like open window, transparent. And it's the difference, it's spending $1 on that capacitor versus 10 cents. It's spending $2 on that op amp versus 25 cents. Now, and the thing that, because we're doing everything digitally, we don't have to worry about having like 30 op amps in our design. So we can use very high quality buffers on each end and preserve it in the digital world and make sure that quality is preserved through the entire signal path. And what I mean by quality is its naturalness, its openness, its transparency, and all these, it's the little attention to the detail that I think makes some of the biggest differences in how the end product comes across.
I would also like degradation of signal, of true signal.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
preserves the the actual signal in and of itself.
just a capacitor can't be underestimated. The benefit of a good capacitor, the dielectric, like a lot of people use those cheap electrolytics to decouple signals and stuff like that. But they time smear the signal because they have dielectric absorption where they'll, something will come in and may release some part of the information in time after the signal itself that it was part of goes. So you get that time smearing effect where the highs just, they don't sound like the highs should sound like they're just hanging out there with the instrument, not like just, like not just like being thrown out there like paint on a wall. You want everything to feel like the whole signal is preserved and together, both in time and in level. And a cheaper capacitor in the signal path will create time smear that some people may say they can't hear it, but when people play through our amps and cabs, I mean, we use polypropylene capacitors in our crossover networks. I mean, again, and I always said from day one when we did the HT series, we used our tweeters in the HT series cost more than the woofers. And people don't realize this, but the leading edge of your low B is in the tweeter. The transient of every note is in the tweeter. So if the tweeter doesn't sound like music and sound natural, it kind of takes away from the rest of the note. So it's kind of like an all or nothing scenario. And a lot of tweeters have put in bass cabinets years ago as kind of like an afterthought, and let's just get something that will just throw some high frequency out there, not realizing that is part of the note that tweeter is reproducing. And, and the more natural that sounds, and people will just, that's why the HT series became so popular right out of the gate. One of the things it was known for was that tweeter and the difference it made in people's sound. Another thing that's very important that is also underestimated is the crossover network in the speaker. It's not just a matter of keeping the low frequencies out of the tweeter so it doesn't blow up. It's making sure that the tweeter response comes in to the woofer's response in such a way that it's a continuation. It's one entity. It's not like, I'm sure you guys have played through bass cabinets where you can hear where the woofer stops and the tweeter comes in. Yeah. That's the crossover network. I categorize it as two different animals. A PA speaker is a reproducer of tone, and a bass cabinet is a producer of tone. The bass cabinet is the sound box of the instrument. The PA cabinet is going to reproduce whatever that bass cabinet and amp combination is producing. And there's a lot of, I use a lot of the same principles in designing a bass cabinet that I would do for a PA cabinet and a home, high-end home audio speaker, which I've designed. But there's some very subtle and not so subtle differences between the two that make a bass cabinet feel and respond more like, like you feel like it's connected to your fingers versus a PA cabinet where you just feel like, I can hear what I'm playing, but it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like what I'm trying to express. Anytime you introduce a crossover in a system, you're introducing phase distortion, which is basically the same thing as group delay. And so basically, let's say you put a 6-inch mid with a 12 or 15-inch woofer and cross it over at 800 hertz. Well, versus running a woofer, because these guys, they think a bass guitar is, needs like a subwoofer. It's not, it's almost like a misnomer. It's all about the mid-range to me. And these guys that brag about having the biggest X max on their woofers, it's like they don't get it. It's also, Tony, it's like when you introduce that crossover in the critical mid-range area, things in that whole, when I say phase distortion or group delay, what's happening is, let's say the mid-range kicks in around 800. So in that crossover area and above and below it, frequencies below the crossover range, you're hearing at a different point in time than the frequencies above that range. So they're not even arriving in the same time because of the distortion. When I say distortion, it's not like distortion being like, oh, it sounds like.
No, I mean, I get it from an electrical standpoint. It's different.
So you're introducing something, that it doesn't sound like, it's not like your G on your bass is going to arrive at a different point in time than your E. You know what I mean? It's all arrives together, and that's what you would expect to hear from your speaker. But when you start getting into these multi-way, three-way designs, it may be a nice flat, even if they do it right, which I'd be willing to bet that they don't. But even if they design it properly, have a good crossover network designed in it, and get a nice flat response, good power response, it doesn't speak the same way because it's introducing these things are not arriving at the same time, and so your ear is not hearing what it's expecting to hear as you're playing your instrument. And that's, so when, a guy standing next to the cabinet may say, hey, that sounds great. But you as the player, when you're plugged into it, you know what you're expecting to hear, and you know when you're not hearing it and when you are hearing it.
Steve, did you get all that? Dielectric absorption.
So my mind is kind of blown right now because.
Welcome to my world.
No, for one, I love what Jim said, that a PA cabinet is for reproduction. Sound like I'm in sex ed or something. For reproducing sound, and a bass cabinet is for producing sound. That makes so much sense because, and then I start thinking back where you said the low B should be like that tweeter should be able to, like, that's the first thing you hear. And I'm thinking back on a lot of cabinets that I've played where I'm like, I don't know what this is. And I'm like, whoa, was that it when I'm playing that lowness that it was missing something? And that's my mind's kind of blown right now. I'm absorbing a lot of heavy. I feel like I'm listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk, and I'm like,
I love it because Jim and I are alma mater from the same university, Northeastern, right?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah.
Double E.
By the way, Steve, excuse me, Tony, 1 second. Steve, just so you know, right about now, Lee will cut me off and go in and take a nap.
No, this is.
I'm just appeasing the camera.
I love it, man. No, it really blew my, like, that whole thing. I'm serious. That, like, I was literally just like, Lee must have seen my face, like wait.
I did. I was like, Steve's still thinking about dielectric absorption 5 minutes ago.
For some reason, I was thinking of reproduction. I don't know.
I almost started getting asked questions about the time release with the capacitance, right? That would have been totally double E.
Man, so good. But seriously, that knowledge right there that's some heavy stuff. I think it just shows the badassness of your products, if that works. How good it is, how well it's thought out. And I always obviously love, well, not obviously, but I think when a company does just such great cabinets and they do an amp, I mean, it's just amazing. For me, I love this stuff. It's killer. Just to
quickly, just to maybe more generalize it, yeah. I guarantee if you went to most manufacturers' cabinets, you would see the exact same crossover network, whether 112, a 210, a 212, a 115 with a tweeter. I guarantee that they're all the same crossover network. I've lost count of how many cabinets we've designed over the last 19 years, but there isn't a single crossover network of all my cabinets that are the same.
It's awesome. And every once in a while, so I've done some stuff with QSC, and they sent me the 12.2 or the 10. So I use that as a little combo. It works, but it in no way would ever replace a real bass amp. I mean, it works. It does the job for smaller gigs, and it has some DSP. It's really cool. I mean, I think it's a great, it's a cool little cab. Big power. You can actually, mess with the EQ, this and that. So I did, but it in no way, like, you can hear the difference. You can feel the difference. So anyways, that was going through my mind too.
Anyways, that's just my take on things. That's my, and every designer has their own philosophies, if you will, or recipes. I always say with sonic chefs, and and so, you know, I'm not saying that I'm right and everyone else is wrong. I hope that didn't come across that way. I'm just talking from how I approach things and why I do what I do. You know, others have, and that's what's great about it is because, you know, Lee and I talk about food a lot, and actually Lee's quite the down there. You should see some of the things he does. So
let's talk food.
We analogize everything in amps and cabs. Amps is all about 8-cylinder versus 4-cylinder. You know, Class D versus 8. You know, but in the world, it's all about food. So it's, but you know, but we're all. I always say we're all sonic chefs, and you know, we all have our own take on it. Just like, you know, I know you guys probably seen cooking sauces and meatballs and all that, but you know, we all have our recipes, and we're always fooling around with it too, because we're always learning. We're always looking to try to improve upon things, or we may learn something along the way that we incorporate in a future design. So that's the nice thing about what I love about what I do is because I'm always learning still. And the day, and it's just, and I'm sure as musicians, you always feel like you're growing and you're, you know, growing your art and improving or learning something that you never thought you would want to learn or didn't know about, you know, from other musicians or from what you're hearing and all that. So it's nice to know that you're always growing. And I think that's important because that's what motivates us to be who we are and to continue to grow. And it makes it's what gives us our passion about what we do, you know, knowing that, you know, there is more to learn. Because I'll tell you, if someone came up to me tomorrow and said, you know everything there is to know, this is it, you're done, I'd be like, well, then I'm going to go do something else, because, you know, it's not, you know, because you always want to feel like there's something out there for you to get to learn and do and stuff like that. So.
Well, you're doing stuff right, Jim and Lee. You guys, I mean, you're seriously killing it. And I couldn't be happier with this. And of course, I can't wait to get my ass back out there and play. But for right now, I've been doing a lot of recording, and I've actually used this for just a lot of DI stuff where I'm recording at home, and it's just fantastic. And I've told the guys, and I think it's great, man. So just please keep innovating, because it's working. We love it.
Thank you.
I think it's
before we
fantastic.
wrap up with everything. Why don't you tell us where's the future of Bergantino? Like Lee, Jim, what do you guys got going on? What do you want to see happen? What would you like to put out in the next year or two? What have you?
Well, I'm trying to.
What can you share, right?
So I'm really trying.
Jim, tell him.
You know, really improve on. I'm trying to fine tune my stuffed pepper recipe. I mean, that's where, you know, that's and we're moving into the eggplant palm world, and you know, that you know, and Lee's. I mean, one of these days, either Lee's gonna come up here, or I got to go down there, and we're gonna have like a we're gonna exchange recipes. I mean, that's.
Oh yeah.
You know, and 15, 20 pounds later, we'll come up for air. And, you know, honestly, Tony, you know, I kind of, it's hard to say really. I mean, you know, it's a continuum almost, you know what I mean? You see where you're at, you kind of, you know, survey the landscape, if you will, and you try to figure out, you know, where you'd like to take it. You know, what direction you would like to go based on obviously where the market's going and what you feel you can bring to the table. You know, I've never been one to be a Me Too guy. You know what I mean? You know, it's, there's always a reason for why I do what I, you know, if the design of a product has a purpose to it. It's not just, oh, you know, let me just put something out there because everyone else has something like this. So, so it's not, you know, so it's not like I'm keeping my cards close to my vest. It's just that we basically talked, you know, you know, definitely exploring the preamp and the IRs, I think was the two big things that we talked about today, where the direction we're looking at. But beyond that, I mean, it's like, you know, it's day to day, and, you know, we'll see what ideas come up. It could be just another, like we were talking about the HG series and mixing 10s and 12s, or it could be just variances of stuff we already have out there. So it's, and one of the nice things about being a smaller size company is I can adapt, and change, and do and innovate, on the flip of a coin. You know what I mean? I just whenever I want to do something, I can just wake up one morning and say, geez, I want to do this, and just go out and do it. And so a lot of it, I get emails a lot. A guy who's going to go out, like, let's say he's going to buy like an HP amp, and he's like, I promise I won't say anything to anyone, but you can tell me if you're going to do a B amp high power. And it's like, I honestly, I'll say it publicly now, it's like, it's not on my agenda. Now, to say that someday I may not wake up and say, I think I'm going to do a B amp high power. But in all honesty and sincerity, it's not something that's on my radar screen right now. I know that option always exists out there, but there are other things that, I'd like to look into short term, and that I think are more pressing and important. And but it like I said, it varies. It just Lee and I will have a lot of discussions, and just come up with ideas and thoughts, and bounce them off of each other, and so it's always an ongoing process, a thought, and that's what makes it interesting and fun too. You never know what you're going to do tomorrow, and and you can just say what ifs, and I mean, I remember all the conversations Lee and I had leading up to the HP, and the feature set, how we wanted to lay it out, what was important, what wasn't. And you actually spend sometimes as much time talking about a product than you do designing it, just because you want to get it right, and you want to get input from people who, have knowledge and experience. And I mean, Lee was, I designed obviously the amp itself, but Lee was instrumental in the feature set and what was important, and what wasn't important, and and we kept going back and forth, and there's a lot of Lee in that HP. So
good.
Well, at some point you just have to distill it down and go, okay, we need to stop it. It has the tools that people need, because
right.
You want to put a blender on it, and you want to put at some point you just have to rein it all in and go, okay, this is a great feature set for this amp, and you just have to eventually go for it, or else you're just going to keep chasing your tail in this conceptualization phase.
Lee, I did tell you there's a USB port in there, right?
Yeah, I think there is. Got one out. I'm going to need another one, by the way.
That's awesome, guys. So, and then social wise, so Lee, where can people, get in touch with you?
I'm on Facebook, and just recently got on Instagram, Lee Presgrave, nothing fancy.
And do you have a Bergantino email? People have
Lee at Bergantino.com.
Lee at Bergantino.com.
Yeah,
And
so
Jim,
any tech questions people have, they can go through me. If I can't answer them, I send them to Jim.
Got it.
They'll usually get me first.
Got it. And how about you, Jim? Is it BergantinoAudio.com? Is that the website?
Bergantino.com, just Bergantino.
Bergantino.com. Okay.
And info at Bergantino is the email that comes to me. And, Holly, who is Holly at Bergantino for all social media and artist relations, et cetera. And actually, Lee works with Holly closely too, a lot of the social media marketing and artist relations side too. So Lee's kind of like,
He's everything.
Holly and I have been able to get along just nicely since Lee joined us, because he's like,
I'm the mediator.
So
That's right.
So if I want to talk to Holly, I have to go through Lee. So
And Lee's a tsunami artist as well, right?
Yeah.
And we got to say that, big shout out to Keith, Stickney.
How about just a little shout out?
No, huge. A huge shout out. Huge. So that relationship, basically, give us a little synopsis on that, the Tsunami Bergantino relationship.
Go ahead, Lee. I'll let you.
Well, I've always admired Keith's cables. I've been using them since he started, and they're still going strong. So one thing, cables, pretty simple. You've got to transfer the signal without any degradation. But one of the big things for me, and probably you guys too as gigging musicians, is they have to be reliable. And Keith's are. He's wielding the soldering iron himself. When you call the company, you're talking to Keith. So he came over day 4 NAMM. You know how day 4 is. We're all punch drunk, and kind of said, hey, we should think about doing something together. And we just started talking and rapping. We're like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. So we just started out, and we 3 items, just 2 speak-ons, different lengths, a 3 and a 6-footer, and then a 15-foot instrument cable right now. Both in this, Bergantino kind of matrix design, as Keith calls it. Nice. Really high quality. All the connectors are top of the line. So we're just really happy to be working with them, and we'll just see where it goes in the future, And
Lee, I've got this is kind of hard number to fathom. I have over 1,000 performances on my original set of Tsunami cables, and I've been with him 8 years ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Huh?
So
Wow.
Without my original set, I still have, and
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, too, Tony, one of the things, I think years ago when I was looking at other cables before Tsunami, when people were saying lifetime guarantee kind of thing, most of the other commercial cables out there rate their lifetime as 3 years. And it's all in the fine print. So for you to say, yeah, I've had these for 8 years, 1,000 gigs, that's a big
Quite the statement.
Well, I can tell from looking at the cables that, they're not going anywhere. I mean, you'd lose it before it would go down,
There's
before.
another company that I used beforehand, and I wasn't an official endorser or anything, that were a lifetime. And I had a problem with one of the 3 sets in 1 year.
Wow.
Went down 3 times in 1 year.
Wow.
So
And they always go down when you can't afford for them to go down. It's not like a cable's going to tell you, I'm going to go down in the middle of this song or during the, it just happens when you're least expecting it and can afford to have it happen.
well,
So,
2 of those 3 times was live.
Oh,
So it's like, I can't afford to do that.
man.
I talked to a couple other people, Damien Erskine, and he's like, he told me about Keith, and I haven't changed yet,
I just, I think, I don't know if it was Lee or Steve was saying, but when somebody is the face of the company that you're talking to, that they care, you know what I mean? And that they're, that it's their name on the company, or they're the person that answers the phone. And I think as one of the things that I enjoy when people call, and first of all, they're like, they can't believe I'm picking up the phone.
That's awesome.
I said, well, if I don't pick it up, no one will. But I think as a society, I think we're kind of like missing that customer service that we grew up with when the companies were smaller, and you were actually talking to a designer or somebody who actually his name is on the product. And so many of these larger companies have been bought so many times that by the time you get through to somebody that can help you, you've already had to rent another piece of gear for a month or a couple of weeks, because you can't even get an answer, never mind a potential service that you need. So I think it's a lost, I don't think art's the right word, but what I'm saying, it's a lost service. I think we don't realize what we sometimes are short-sighted and not realizing sometimes these smaller companies, they're more specialized. They go the extra mile. Like I was talking earlier, I look at my products as something where I rather spend an extra, $1 versus 10 cents on a part and give you that difference than say, well, I can save 90 cents times X amount and put it to my bottom line and still sell it every day of the week because my name is XYZ. And so, I think, something like Keith and, hopefully us, that, that's what people realize is that, look, we're not perfect. I'm not saying we don't have a, occasional problem or something happens, but it's what you do when something does happen. And you'll always be known for your customer service in some respects more than you'll be known for your product itself. And that's the comfort that people take in any brand is the customer service aspect of it before they even buy it.
Yeah. Fantastic, man. Please just,
Steve, can I mention one thing
Lee.
before we go?
Uh-huh.
Everyone to check out their latest issue of Bass Player. Turn to page 10 to check out this handsome bag.
Do not trust that man.
That's
All right.
our guy, John.
Nice.
How cool is that?
Kudos.
So I
That's
just wanted to
awesome.
mention that. That was cool.
I think Steve and I are John's biggest fans, actually.
Yes, we are all this crew. Yeah, but man, so seriously, thank you so much for doing this. We are just so glad to kind of be a part of this, and we're going to put this out. This will be out, I think, this coming weekend, and we'll tag everybody, and I'll put all the, everybody's email. But I'm just, it's amazing to talk to you guys, and we just love what you're doing, and I'm glad that you guys are healthy during this crazy time, and hopefully all this crap is winding down, and we can get back to life as we knew it. Damn it, and get out there and get your ass off. So, just thanks for joining. I'm going to stop recording, but
We'll all hang on for a moment.
We'll all hang on and keep talking. This is where the real talk happens, and we say goodbye to everybody.
The dirt.
So yeah,
Are these the bloopers?
these are the bloopers, exactly. So all right, hang on, guys, and everybody. Thanks for watching and listening. All right.